So, taking a lot of people off, and he's becoming more rude with a very big understatement. But through this, he then calls the Pope the Antichrist. So, if you ever wonder where that one started coming from, here's where it started. So, at this point, the authorities, meaning the imperial authorities of Charles V, said, okay, you are way out of hand. There's revolts everywhere. I have villages burning down. There's not peace in the empire by any stretch of the imagination. And they were talking peace at a very low level. Their bar of peace was like, there's less than a couple 100,000 people dying a day, something like that. Because comparatively it was in the past. So everything was in chaos. The civil authorities arrest him, but they let him go and say, you have a couple of days to get your stuff in order because you're going to be executed. Go home. Get ready. And so, that lovely little duke who had his own little castle and own little army said, well, you know what? I don't like the emperor either, nor do I really care for the pope. Come stay in my castle. We'll protect you. So he goes and stays in the castle at Wittenberg. And during that time, he's in the castle precincts for over a year. He never leaves, but this is where he articulates his theology, what we would later call Lutheranism in general, and where he wrote things such as the Babylonian exile, referring to people and Protestantism and things like that, and how, basically how everything had gone wrong, and we're now figuring out the truth. So for however many hundreds of years, it was over 1,000 years, everything was wrong. But then now, I've decided everything is right again because I've given this stuff. So at this point, it becomes really strange. I know, it was strange before, but now it gets worse. So as he's doing all this stuff, we see other people breaking off, taking to his cause, not necessarily to espouse religious reform or anything to that matter, but espousing, I want to get rid of the emperor and I want to get rid of the pope. Because I don't want to have to pay the emperor taxes, for one thing. And so what was going on was that the people who took him in, the lovely princes and dukes of Germany, decided, guess what? We can use this to our great advantage. We don't want the emperor either. We want to become our own sovereigns. So what they do is use him in a way to where they can get their own powerful people in place and declare themselves independent of each other. So the German princes, northern Germany, and when I mean Germany, I mean the loosely bound together confederation of princedoms that was in the northern area, saw this and was like, okay, good. I just saw what so-and-so did down here with Luther stuff. I'm going to do that too. I declare myself independent of the church and the empire. And then they started to gather the armies together. So basically at this point, Luther was a pawn to the German principalities. Because they wanted to do what they wanted to do and they didn't want anybody telling them they couldn't do it. Case in point would be that we have a Lutheran, well not Lutheran yet, he was now, but Frederick of Saxony decided that he wanted to become independent as well. So he supported Luther, got his private army together, and one of his brothers who was a priest decided, I'm going to follow Luther too. He gets married, he starts burning down churches, liquidating assets, and declares himself the Duke of the area. I am now the Duke of Prussia. And it stayed that way. His family of the Brandenburg stayed in power till basically to the end of when the Prussians fell. But this was what was going on. Another case was that one of the Philip of Hesse demanded that Luther recognize his many, many marriages. I want more than one wife. Luther was like, okay. Literally. It was like to espouse and make sure that my thoughts get, spread throughout the world. I can deal with a little bit on the side of the monarchs. I can give in to my moral. I can give, we can bend the rules. And he literally says that a little lies that helps the truth is okay. And it was just like, everything had gone crazy. There was no truth, there was no absolutes anymore. And so we get this chaotic stage. It continued to the point to where there was a peasant uprising against this specifically. We do not want to be beholden to these people, they're insane. The princes have gone mad. They're killing priests, they're killing nuns, monks, burning churches, taking all our stuff. And they rebelled. So it was one of many peasant rebellions. Then the princes got together and said, Luther, we want you to condemn this. Not only does he condemn it, boy howdy does he condemn it. He says, and I quote, and this is from the papers he sent out, strike, slay, front, and rear, nothing is more devilish than sedition. There must not be sleep. No patience, no mercy, they are children of the devil. So in one peasant revolt, over 100,000 people were slain. And several villages were burnt to the ground. All priests, religious were murdered. And people lost all their food because the crops were destroyed. So he went even further down the road into that, to where he was willing to, okay, whatever, and just do what the princes have asked him. Now, eventually we get to a section that's called the Confession of Augsburg, where he basically, kind of like the Lutheran Constitution.
That's what?
It's almost like the Lutheran Constitution. It's like their list of theological tenets,
Yeah.
which he espouses and articulates everything in like a precept form that he already espoused beforehand. The northern princes of Germany absolutely loved it. Everything was great. It's like, my people like me. It's like, your little group in the north like you. The peasants want to kill you. But they helped these people. What came worse was that there was a big problem. Europe was being invaded by the Turks. They were at the gates of Vienna, Austria.
Turks were?
Mm-hmm. And out of necessity and out of desperation, the Emperor Charles V turns to his now Protestant northern brothers, and it's like, can we please not do this right now? We got big problems on this side. We need help. This is the first Turkish invasion. There was quite a few more, but they said, no, it's your problem, you deal with it. Then, out of necessity, he's like, okay, look, I'm not going to fight you to survive this. We'll call a truce. I won't destroy you, you won't try to destroy me. We get ships and armies and get them out of Europe. They were okay with that. So they got together and got rid of the Turkish threat. Now after the fact, they had eventually called together what is called the Peace of Augsburg in 1555, which said that the religion of the prince is the religion of the people. Which, that wasn't no peace, I wouldn't think. Especially if you were a Catholic in a Lutheran area, or if you were a Lutheran in a Catholic area, it wasn't happy either way, because nobody liked anybody at this point because everybody kept killing each other. And Luther, upon his death, he was even more raucous, even more crass. Actually, his friends said that he was incredibly rude and crude at this point. He was dying of several diseases. He was bloated. He had gout really badly. So he had a whole host of issues. But at this point, he'd become not useful. He'd been pushed to the side by the princes. Sure, you can stay in this place, that's fine. Just don't bother me. And he died in obscurity with his former nun wife. And he did die in obscurity, but not without first continually attacking the Pope, calling for the death of Jews, and basically kind of going on various tirades and rants, which at this point I think he actually went into full-on dementia or something, because he literally...
The advance of cynicism, yeah.
And went way, way, way further than he expected. How we on time?
I think he was an alcoholic too, wasn't
He had problems with some drinks. He also believed that he had a demon in him because he suffered from constant constipation. So, yeah. I would call constipation a demon, but I don't. Anyway, so how are we doing on time?
You've got about 20 minutes.
Okay, good. Because when I get to the later on. Okay, now Luther is gone. He's dead. Unfortunately, he dies completely out of the church. But then other people see how Luther was able to spread his message through the princes and the authorities.
You got approximate date of when he died?
Yes. Let's see. February the 18th, 1546.
That was rather specific, okay.
All right. So at this point in time, we see people such as Calvin and others like him looking to create their utopian Christian empire. And I don't even put quotes around that because I don't even know what to put them around that. Yes.
Yeah, but it's basically, okay, Luther's gone, we know the philosophy he has in place, and we'll carry that on, I think is what you're telling us.
Yeah, and they'll change it to their needs and modify it. But remember also that during Luther's time period, there were little groups kind of popping up. You have like Anabaptists and other groups that were espousing different things, especially like in the Netherlands. For some reason, it spread through the German-speaking territories, I guess because it was spread German, or in various places after that point. All the while, the good King of England, Henry VIII, Luther is evil and of the devil. Yay, Catholics. We're still good with Catholics in England. And actually, this is where he writes, again, quotation marks, The Defense of the Sacraments, which is actually penned by St. Thomas More and St. John Fisher. But the king wrote it. Here's your present. Oh, good, you're my favorites. Please don't do anything else. So we see this dynamic. So again, we still had, things were okay in England, but they were starting to go bad. So then we're beginning to sour in England, but we go back into the German areas. Oh, I didn't get a question.
Well, I was just scratching my
Okay,
head.
just, I'm too attentive. So we see in, after all this has happened, people had taken Wycliffe's, Huss, and Occam's works and modified them, actually. Now we're getting to the point where it's saying that not only can we get rid of the church and the empire, but we can get rid of the princes. We can get rid of the kings and dukes.
Oh.
They don't like that part. The kings and the dukes are like, wait, no. We don't think about it. You're condemned. You're going to hell. And they tried to get them to be the ministers, Protestant ministers, specifically Lutherans, say, you can't do that. That's not allowed. Even though I use that same theory to get rid of my own emperor, you know.
Who said let's get rid of all this authority? Who said that?
This is where Calvinism starts coming into it.
This is part of Calvin.
So this thought was cropping up, and then Calvin decided he wanted to take this to make his own little world. His own little world ended up being poor little Geneva. Calvin was never a priest. He was a layman who never took vows. He eventually got married, and his father was expecting him to become a lawyer. He didn't want to do that. And then eventually he slowly but surely came over to the thinking of Luther and then changed it more radically. I don't like princedoms, temporal or spiritual authority. It should be one thing. It should not be two different things. The person, your leader, not saying king, not saying prince, not saying duke, we should all be equal, as long as I'm on top, basically what it ended up being,
Oh, okay.
what Calvin said. So what happened was that he went to Geneva, was writing to the King of France, I'm going to convert him to my ways. You're going to convert the King of France. You're calling evil because he's a king, to get rid of the Catholic faith, and to give up all your stuff as a king. Everybody knew that was going to happen. But he felt it was his duty to go on a very militaristic crusade of promoting his ideas. He was actually, whenever people talk about how, oh, people were put in cages, people did this, people were burnt alive, this, that, and the other, people were tortured. Yeah, that was Calvin. That was mostly Calvin. It did happen in other places to a lesser extent, and usually the local civil authorities, state authorities. And obviously there was all sorts of in between, but Calvin was the pioneer in torture and destruction, if you want to call it. Basically what he did was that after he had discovered Luther's teachings, he took it to extreme. He started attacking church officials in Paris, which was one of the centers in Catholic learning, and eventually he was forced to flee to Switzerland. There he took on a wife. He was actually exiled from Geneva for a while, but then he was allowed back. At this point, he was able to take over Geneva literally. The authorities were all destroyed. The churches were removed. If they were Lutheran even, they would get destroyed. Or they would be reformed again. And the Catholic churches, sorry about your luck, you know. So once he had purified, literally, the area, he set up a theocracy. And we're talking things that we would only think about happening, say, after the revolution in Iran or something. We think of the Puritans and how they had their various laws and were extraordinarily harsh punishments. This is where they got it from. You could, first off, he espoused predestination, meaning that God has determined you to either go to heaven or hell, regardless of what you think. So you could be a sinner, not even be baptized. You can go straight to heaven because God said it. Or you can go straight to hell, even if you're holy and pious, because God said it. And that was kind of a taking from Occam's thought that God is in absolute control. He can change his laws at will, which later became nominalism, which later was actually espoused by, well, not later, was already being espoused by Islam. We call it removing of second causes. I'm moving the cup, and our thought, I did that with my own power. Now, with Calvinism and his thoughts, nominalism, and also Islam, I did not move the cup. God moved that cup because God commanded that I move my hand. Now, I could jump up and push poor Dorothy in the floor. But God told me, but God made me do that. I did not do that.
This is kind of the story we get from the Islam, right?
We did not, Mohammed did not move to the mountain moved to Mohammed.
It was God does it not. We have no free will. So free will was abolished in this thought process. So that's a weird commonality between strict Calvinists and Islamic thought. God does everything. We have no free will. So anything that I do is the will of God, regardless of what it is. So in that thought, in that realm, he sets up his theocracy in Geneva. It was pretty bad. So when he came back in 1538 to Geneva, he implemented extraordinarily severe penalties for anybody doing anything that he thought was incorrect. First, he transformed the city government into, like I said, a theocracy, but Calvin was the head of it. Then he also removed the idea of free expression of religion. If you were caught praying in Latin, you were put to death. If you were seeing any leanings for Catholicism, you were ardently tried to converted, or you're burned at the stake. Let's see here. If you criticized Calvin, you get put to death. If you fell asleep while he was giving a sermon, you weren't put to death, but you were tortured, jailed, then let go. Don't fall asleep ever again. People were tortured, beheaded. It was quite terrible, and thought of a whole lot of other horrible, horrible, horrible things. new torture methods that were just like, oh my gosh, where in the world is he getting this stuff? Then he continued. He burnt a Spaniard who came to talk to him, asking about what was this all about. So one thing led to another, and he was burned alive at the stake. We also have strict punishment for the crimes of adultery, getting pregnant outside marriage, heresy, striking a parent, and let's see here, blasphemy. All these things incurred the death penalty. You had to go to worship services, or you'd be very severely punished. So worship was regulated to just prayers and reading from the Bible. Singing was okay, however, it had to be strictly monitored. And to tell you, and attendance was monitored. They counted how many people were there. Who was not there, they would show up at your house. Why aren't you there? Well, I'm dying of the plague. It doesn't matter. Go to church. And I'm serious. And he took this even further by setting up inquisitions that monitored everybody. It was like a religious police. There were severe punishments for dancing, for playing cards, for drinking, for braiding your hair if you're a girl, and again for falling asleep during sermons. Also, the Inquisition would be convened twice a year, where they would go into people's houses and scour the houses, make sure that everything was in keeping with their theology. If you had any contraband on you, you would be very severely punished, or if it was bad, they thought it was bad enough, you'd be put to death. If all else fails, they get put to death. And so,
That guy keep from getting assassinated. I mean, he was a nasty person. I don't understand this.
Must have had a good pair of roller skates.
he basically ruled it by fear, and he had enough people backing him to where no one would
You
question
obviously
him.
had to have our cluster right up.
Yeah, he did. He dominated everything. Yes.
One thing before we go is the Vatican II, they started a commission, and it's the Lutheran and Catholic Commission. It started. It's still in progress today, and a lot of the things you said, and a lot of things were strictly against Calvin and these people and Martin Luther. But what they're coming out with is that the Catholic Church was just as bad, and if not worse, in some instances. In other words, what was going on with the popes and the anti-popes and all this stuff, and people yin and yang, they were just pretty much localized to Germany and some of the Scandinavian countries attached to there. But why are they doing all this if they think that history that was coming from different angles was correct?
You mean, why is there a sin?
This commission's been going on since
This is
1970.
Yeah, it's
Since
promoted,
Vatican II.
this to have dialogue with specific Lutheran groups, because there's several. One of the Lutheran groups, I know what you're talking about. Basically, they had one of their documents, and the Pope saw nothing wrong with the document because there was nothing in it that was bad. Theologically, a lot of early Lutheran stuff is very much in line with Catholic faith. But then after the fact is when everything kind of got really bad. One group of Lutherans have signed a document saying, yeah, we're in accord with all what the Pope says, and vice versa. But the other group said absolutely not, unequivocally no, to all those things. But the reason we did that is to foster a dialogue, and as St. John Paul II talked about how, hopefully to their eventual conversion and return to the church.
Because there were statements that came out, like with, for instance, Matthew Kelly, when he was here. He said if it wasn't for Martin Luther, there would be no Catholic Church. In other words, he said things were so corrupt on both sides that it was, he kind of not necessarily did the right thing, but what he did wasn't necessarily, in other words, there's had to be some good parts of it.
Stimulated the Counter-Reformation.
Yeah,
Yes.
otherwise they wouldn't be
It
from
was one of the
74. I think the council ends in this year. And then they've got a 2017 schedule coming out. Now, why are we doing all this if we feel that, you know, that Martin Luther was the devil in disguise? That's what I'm getting at. Plus, you know, they donated $10,000.
Oh, yeah, I know.
A couple of
I'm not
Lutherans
saying
to
that,
our last
but
collection.
Since then, they've modified their religious views.
Well, I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, because since Lutheranism, I don't, for lack of a better term, evolved, they changed a lot of their stances and obviously aren't violent. But the idea that the church would be around without Luther is quite honestly ludicrous, because it already started to change before Luther had even, he rightly pointed out things that were bad. But the Counter-Reformation, which wasn't called Counter-Reformation until after the fact, had already begun and continued and was implemented a few years later after Trent, which set up seminaries. So you had to be highly educated, be a priest, you had to all these things. Some of it was in response to what Luther thought, but they already were seeing that and addressing that. When in England, St. John Fisher was actually one of the onuses into reforming the church, in that there would be seminaries set up. He thought the clergy needed to be educated more, so he implemented that. All these things were brought into the Council of Trent and brought from that and then spread throughout. So it had already begun. Luther just kind of spearheaded it and then let his pride get in the way and then push things to an extraordinary extreme. And why some bishops have done that, or groups have been moving in that direction, and a lot of times Cardinal Mueller has said, don't go too far, because you're skirting with breaking away from the church again, as he won the Germans already 3 times in the past 2 years. You're about to come into schism. What they do is not church teaching, it's just talking amongst themselves, which is fine. But it wouldn't change anything from Catholic doctrine or other stuff, because they can set their own groups and talk. One of the more beneficial things that happened with the Anglican Catholic dialogue, finally with Benedict, was the setting up of the Anglican Ordinariate, which means that they could have their traditions of the Anglican community, but at the same time become Catholic, which they were kind of looking for a way since the past 250 years. And so that opened the door for it. And that was actually how Paul VI, John Paul II, Benedict XVI, and Francis have said that this is what it's supposed to lead to, is dialogues, to reconciliations of the one church. So I have one more person to go over. He's very short, little, so we won't go into that one.
Zwingli.
Thank you. Basically, he took the ideas of Calvin. He was a little bit less militant in it. He took Luther's ideas, except he got rid of all sacraments. There was no such thing as sacraments. And this is kind of where we get the movements of what we typically think of when we think of Protestants.
Who was this?
Zwingli.
Wiggly?
I'll spell it. Z-W-I-N-G-L-I. Zwingli. And it's Ulrich, L-U-T-U-L-R-I-C-H. But he was more interested in busting up churches and relics and stuff. And he was kind of along the vein of Calvin, but not as militant, although he liked to blow up things and burn things. Which we didn't get into, but England's Reformation was way different. Started off way differently, ended up way differently, and was a different animal altogether. That's why a lot of times Anglicans won't even call themselves Protestants, because it didn't start out like the rest of them.
We're about out of time.
Yeah.
So if you'll,
Sure. Anyway, it was all wrapped up in the Council of Trent. Yes.
Was the infallibility of the Pope already declared, during or prior to
It was-
Martin Luther's?
Yes, it was understood at that.
Okay.
It started, major discussion started out with, I think it was probably, but then it wasn't defined until
First Vatican Council.
First Vatican Council in late 1800s. So it was kind of like the Immaculate Conception. You know, we've
Okay,
always
but-
taught it.
But the Pope was perfect already, I mean.
And you pronounced it as cathedral, it was in the proper way, yes. Okay, so we'll go ahead and close in prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Almighty merciful God, again we thank you for this day of Pentecost, when you sent the Holy Spirit upon the apostles to teach the truth. We ask you to send your Holy Spirit in abundance, and send into our hearts especially, that we will always spread the gospel by our words, our actions, and in great understanding with others. We ask all these things through Jesus Christ, our Lord.
Amen.
As a former Southern Baptist, I would have no idea that I was going to be doing this.